Now, a word about one of our sponsors, BetterHelp. In the Mega Podcast, we talk a lot about mental health and balance and wellness. And in order to have balance in your life, you need to have good mental health. Not having good mental health causes a lot of problems, from problems with your work, your personal relationships. It causes burnout and stress. But BetterHelp can help you manage your mental health. It is the world's largest online therapy tool that offers live video, phone, and live chat sessions with a licensed therapist that is perfectly suited to your needs. It's a service that makes professional therapy affordable and accessible to anyone in need. And with BetterHelp, there are over 30,000 licensed therapists that are available to you that can help you address your issues. As a viewer of the Mega Podcast, you get 10% off the first month service when you use BetterHelp. All you need to do is go to www.betterhelp.com/Raquel, and you will get automatically 10% off. Again, that is www.betterhelp.com/Raquel, RAQUEL, for 10% off your first month service. You are now on your way to making your mental health a top priority and to achieving the balance of health, wealth, and happiness. Thank you for watching. Hi, my name is Raquel Valdelamar, and welcome to the Mega Podcast, Balancing Health, Wealth, and Happiness, where I speak with high achievers on how they fulfill their professional dreams while maintaining balance throughout their lives. Today, I'm with Kwame Alexander, a poet, educator, producer, and #1 New York Times bestselling author of 38 books. He is also the writer and executive producer of the crossover TV series based on the novel of the same name, which won a Newbery Award and premiered on the Disney Channel and Disney Plus in April 2023. His latest book, Why Fathers Cry at Night, published by Little Brown and Company, is a soulful mashup of poems, recipes, and stories. In this book, Kwame shares a moving portrait on becoming a growing man, learning how to love, stumbling along the way, and getting back up again. Kwame was born in New York and grew up in Virginia. His father was a minister, scholar, and book publisher, and his mother was an educator, so he was always surrounded by books. At Virginia Tech, he took a writing class with award-winning poet Nikki Giovanni, which eventually sparked the artist within him and his future writing career. He has 2 daughters. In his free time, he likes to play softball with his daughter, listen to audiobooks, and travel to schools across the globe. Kwame, welcome to the Mega Podcast.
It's good to be here. And you did that all in one breath.
I did. Well, you have quite the accomplishment, but I want to start out with just your background. You grew up in a family of just artists. It looks like your sister is a model and a model and a writer. You have
Yep.
another sister who's a photographer. Your father was a minister, scholar, and book publisher. Your mother was an educator. So it seems that being an artist kind of runs in the family.
Yeah, it does. I tell people all the time that I did not find writing or discover this writing career. Writing found me. I don't think I had a choice.
It just kind of came from you. You just had to put the words out.
Yeah, I even went to college to get away from literature because our home was extremely bookish and very much centered around the power of words. And so I'm going to be a doctor. Like I was going to
Hmm.
be a doctor and get away from it. And of course, I found my way back to it. So
And it's a great journey. But you started also writing. I read at 12 years old. You started your first poem by writing a poem to your mother, and that's what kind of led to your writing career.
you really did your research.
You're right.
Dear mommy, I hate Mother's Day because in my heart, every day is Mother's Day and I love you, dear mommy. And she cried, like she loved the poem. And of course, I look back on it, that was a horrible poem. But I think what it did for me is it just showed me that words, you know, are really
Yeah,
powerful, that they can have an
yeah.
impact.
Words matter.
And when you're expressing yourself, when you're sharing the things that matter to you, you can you can make someone's
You
day.
absolutely can. And I love what you say. You do a lot of tours with schools. I love you've traveled to 2,000 schools across the country across the world.
across the world.
And you say kind of your motto is changing the world one word at a time. I think that really is beautiful because words do matter, especially to these young kids who think that words are just words. They're not really they don't really matter. So why choose words as your medium to change?
Well, I think, a lot of teachers and librarians, or let me speak for the ones that I had
Mhm.
growing up, they thought that they had to tell us what books to read, or they had to force us to read certain books because they were forced or they were told, and nobody ever sort of made the connection that maybe we should let the kids choose the books, And so I grew up not really interested in Tuck Everlasting and not really interested in The Good Earth. I just wasn't into it. And my teachers took that as, oh, well, he's reluctant. And I wasn't a reluctant reader. I was well read, again, because I was raised by two writers and readers. I just wasn't interested in the books they were giving me. And so I've tried to spend a lot of time making words interesting and cool for young people, and B, reminding teachers and librarians that books are amusement parks. And sometimes we got to let the kids choose the rides.
Yeah. You also talked about being forced, to forced reading
Mhm.
when you were young, and sometimes you saw books as punishment because your father would force you to read books from his publishing company. So talk about that and just how you went from seeing books as punishment to actually learning how to love books.
Well, you know, as I write about in the memoir, as a child, looking back on my childhood, I thought that it was pretty mean and pretty harsh to make your kid read your dissertations
And he would quiz you on it, right?
in the checkout line at the grocery store.
Really?
And so he wrote 3 dissertations at Teachers College.
Mhm.
It was one on Adam Clayton Powell, the other on Elijah Muhammad, and the other on Richard Allen. It's 3 Black men in America, and looking at um, their religious, the crossover between their religion and their education, and what they did for the Black community. So I had to read these books, and I did not
Not
want.
books a 12-year-old wanted to read.
No
Yeah.
12-year-old wanted to read it. But here's the thing: what I remember is that I read them, and I actually learned a lot.
Mhm.
Right. And there were some parts of these books that I enjoyed reading. And there was some pride in the fact that my father wrote this book. But I wasn't going to tell him that
Mhm.
because I wanted to play Atari, or I wanted to go play basketball or do these
Be
things
a
that
12-year-old.
12-year-olds do. But, one of the things I thought about recently is that because it wasn't just my dad, I had my mom. And I realized that all the times he was, quote, forcing me to read this stuff, she never like stepped in and said, "You don't have to do that." Like, I feel like they had a plan, you know?
Mhm.
And so this idea, like you said in the beginning, of how did, you know, I come to writing, or why did I decide to choose words? I honestly think that my mother and father had a plan, that they sat down and said, maybe not sat down and said it, but they knew that they were going to sort of try to create this artist, this writer who really was about trying to change the world one word at a time.
And it's also too, you mentioned in the book about how you were loved. Maybe your father loved you through his words, through the books that he was doing, and that was his way of trying to show you he loved you in his own way.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it was. I mean, I know that now.
But it's hard to see that as a 12-year-old.
Right. I couldn't articulate it or understand it. But it's not lost on me that I've written 38 books. I am actually doing this thing that I complained so much about as a kid. And I ask my kid to read my books. And she's 14 now.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking, but my books are cool. You should want to read them. But she has the same reaction. Like when she was younger, she would read them.
Hmm.
She's got her own life now, and I get it. I see it. And so it's just an interesting sort of coming full circle, you know?
But it's also about being interesting. One of your mentors, Nikki Giovanni, I remember in the research said to you, I can teach you how to write. I can't teach you how to be interesting.
Yeah. Every time I hear that, it just reminds me of how I felt when I first heard it.
It's
I,
powerful.
yeah, it's powerful, and it's hard. It's harsh.
But it's also makes you real. It's like, how do you write to be interesting to tell something, whether it's 7-year-old child,
Hmm.
14-year-old teenager, or a 30-year-old adult, or a 60-year-old, grandmother. What is it's interesting, and I think that's also true about being a writer. Is it's having a point of view that you can then share, and having a life of rich experiences so that you can have something interesting to talk about, that somebody, whether they're 7 years old or whether they're 60 years old, they'll get something out of it.
I feel like I need to borrow that exact translation because that's exactly what she was saying.
Yeah.
Like, are you live a life worth writing about?
Yeah.
Walk through life being a willing participant. Pay attention. Say yes. Be engaged. Be authentic. Be real.
Ben Franklin said, you either write things worth reading or do things worth writing.
Mm,
I
there
like
you
that.
go.
I like that.
Yeah.
So you talked about how you went to Virginia Tech and you actually wanted to kind of get away from book publishing and poetry. You actually studied pre-med,
Hmm.
and then you took a writing class. So tell me who Nikki Giovanni was.
Well, before I took the writing class, sort of the impetus for taking the writing class was I was on campus one day and I saw this really beautiful woman who I had seen the previous year. This was the first day of school, back to school, and I had seen her the previous year, and she was out of my league. I'd seen her at a party or something.
Hmm.
She was dating like basketball players and stuff. But I saw her, and I remember walking up to her and just shooting my shot and reciting a love poem, some corny love poem that I had written. And my full name is Edward Curtis Kwame Alexander. The first 2 years of college, I went by Edward. I've never told anyone this.
Mm.
Like,
Wow.
you're getting the scoop.
I'm so glad. Thank you, Kwame.
Are people going to see this?
They're going to see this. Oh, yes, they are. So now everyone knows that you told me something. I'm very honored. You told me a secret.
My third year in college, I said I want to be called Kwame.
Why? What changed from being called Edward to Kwame?
I think I was sort of coming into my own as an activist
Okay.
on campus and, you know, really wanting Virginia Tech to do right by its Black
Mm.
students, wanting it to divest in apartheid. Um, so I was so my consciousness was rising,
Mm.
and Kwame is a Ghanaian name, and it means born on Saturday. Well, it turns out I was born on Wednesday. But my father wanted me to be, he named me after the first president of Ghana, whose name was Kwame Nkrumah.
Really?
And so I felt like, okay, I'm going to sort of be, be called Kwame to identify with that part of me, this new Kwame who's emerged. And so I go up to her and I recite this poem. And she looks at me, she's like, oh, okay, I see you. She's like, I say, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm Kwame. And she said, your mama calls you Ed. I'm gonna call you Ed. And I remember like, no, my name's Kwame. Um, but I ended up writing her several poems. She ended up coming over for dinner. There was a trailer that was turned into 3 apartments. So I had an apartment that was as small as these 2 chairs that we're sitting in. And I cooked her dinner. And I remember feeling like I'm a poet and saying, okay, what's next? And I had gotten a C in organic chemistry or a C minus, and I'd really studied. And I said, I don't think organic chemistry, biochem is the way to go. So let me try something else. Nikki became a visiting professor. I'm going to take a Nikki Giovanni advanced poetry class because I know how to write poetry now because I've written these love poems and they got me a girlfriend. So it works.
That's how it worked.
So that's where it started. I had no idea I was going to be a writer or a poet. I was just trying something different and new in terms of my academic pursuits.
But then you got a C in Nikki Giovanni's class.
3 C's.
3 C's.
Yeah.
And you didn't speak to her. You were so angry for getting those C's. You didn't speak to her for 3 years?
3 years.
3
Yeah.
years.
In fact, it was 3.5 years.
But then that also motivated you, though. That also motivated you to say, even though I got C's, I'm going to pursue poetry as a profession.
Oh, because I felt like she was wrong. Like I felt like the C's weren't warranted.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't justified. And so
maybe she thought you weren't interesting at that point. Your writing was good, but you weren't writing about interesting things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she told me.
Really?
And one of the things I remembered recently, and I gotta find this, is that our last interaction in 1990 was a letter she wrote to me. It was 3 pages. It was single spaced.
Mm.
And I feel like it was typewritten. And the first line of the letter, I still remember, "Dear Kwame, it is unfortunate that you are trapped in an image." That was the first line of the letter.
Really?
So you can imagine where it's going.
Mm-hmm.
And she just lit into me. Of course, looking back on it, the fact that she took the time to write me a 3-page letter, like that should have been some indication that she cared.
Yeah.
It would take me 10, 12 years to realize that she cared.
It was like almost her way, like your father, a similar way of like how she showed her love to you in this very tough love kind of way.
And to this day, she tells me, I never gave you a C, Kwame, but if I did, you deserved it. and then she adds, and look at you now.
Yeah. It's really interesting just having who are the mentors in your life, and sometimes the people that change you are the people that are harshest to you, but it's valuable. Is there something you want to read related to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking I wrote this letter to my daughters.
This is the book, everyone. Why Fathers Cry at Night.
I wrote a letter to my daughters in here, and I talk about this, and I gotta find it.
We'll pause the if you want to. We'll pause the.
I literally have no idea where it is.
Oh, we can.
So I can look at it while we go on. Yeah.
You visited over 2,000 schools around the world since 1994. What is the purpose of visiting the schools and actually connecting with these kids across the globe? I know it's obviously to promote, all of your children's books. But it seems like you don't see a lot of authors do this. I mean, there's a real personal reward you get from seeing these young elementary, middle school, high school kids see your books. What is that?
Well, first of all, it was a way of making a living, of trying to, I was always on this journey to figure out how to make a living as a writer. And so my first writerly job out of college was in Arlington, Virginia. And it was, I was hired as a poet in the schools. And I was paid $25 an hour for 1 hour a day.
Wow.
My first school visit was, I showed up It was the Arlington Technical School. And I remember thinking, what is a technical school? This is interesting. And I walked in and there was a metal detector. And I thought, this is going to be really interesting. And I was taken back to a class where a teacher was sitting at their desk reading a newspaper. And the kids were either asleep or listening to music or doing whatever. And I was introduced as the poet. And I was supposed to spend 90 minutes with them. It's like, I don't understand what I'm going to do here. How's this going to work? And I remember standing up on a chair and just screaming. I got up this morning feeling good and black, thinking black thoughts. I did black things like played all my black records and minded my own black business. I put on my best black clothes, walked out my black dough, and Lord have mercy, white snow. I remember the kids just started laughing and they started paying attention. And I was able to do the workshop presentation, and they were cool and they were like, are you coming back? And I just have always loved to see the light bulb moment when kids get it, that this poetry thing is cool.
Mm-hmm.
When the teacher had put his newspaper down and he was paying attention. I love it when people, because I think most of us have forgotten how much we love poetry.
Yeah.
It was the way we learned how to speak and listen and read and write, the lullabies, fairy tales, nursery rhymes, the rhythm and the rhyme. That's how we all
Right.
learned. And so I feel like it's my job to remind us of that. I know what poetry has done for me. I mean, it got me married
Got you married.
twice.
Right. But also talk about how it's the balance of you have this passion for this art. Your art is poetry. But then how do you make a living out of that?
Right.
And you talked in the book about how it also led to your divorce, pursuing your career as a poet. It wasn't enough. I mean, at that time in your life, very early on, it wasn't enough.
Right.
And the poetry is also what led to your first divorce. So
Yeah. I don't know if it's the poetry or the writing or the career that led to the divorce.
the career of being a poet.
It was more so the not recognizing that you need to get a job.
Right.
Like you can do
Mhm.
this stuff. You can still write poetry. You can still publish books. But you also have to have this understanding of you have a family to take care of. And I was really young and just I hadn't figured that out because I was so gung ho. I'm gonna be a poet. I'm gonna be a writer. It was singularly focused.
Mhm.
So it was less of the poetry, the beautiful art of that. And it was more of just not getting a job.
So to the young people watching this who, well, let's say they want to be a poet.
Right.
They want to be a poet or an artist or a musician or a painter,
Mm-hmm.
but they live in LA, they're big city, they have responsibilities, they
Right.
have to pay their rent.
Right.
What would you tell them? What would you tell them to how do they balance the pursuit of their artistic dream while also dealing with the reality of the financial responsibilities that they have? Having been there.
Which camera am I looking at? Who am I talking to?
Right there.
I'm talking to
Yeah.
them. Balance the responsibility of being an artist with being a human being who understands that they have responsibilities in this world, people to take care of, like yourselves. So there is this thing that you do where you delay your gratification. Okay, you want to be an artist. It drives you. It's your passion, and that's great. And until you get to a point where your avocation and your vocation sort of meet up, where your passion and your profit connect, you got to figure out a way to stay sane and stay healthy and make sure you handle your self-care and make sure the mortgage gets paid and do all of these things that are going to keep you, you know, growing.
Mm.
And so it's just a balance. It's what did Denzel say in the movie, The Great Debaters? And he was quoting the actor. The character said, Um, do the things you have to do so that you can do the things you want to do. It's as simple as that. But it's hard to know that when you don't know. Like my dad says, you can't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you, do the things you have to do so that you can do the things you want to do.
I love what you said about just there's going to be a point where your passion and your profit meet up, but it's not going to happen immediately.
It could happen
It
immediately.
could. It could.
It could happen tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
That was my thinking. It was like, oh, when is it? I remember asking Steph, saying, Steph, when is it going to happen? When is the big payday? When am I going to be able to do this? On my way she was dropping me off at my 13th or 14th job.
Mm-hmm.
When is this going to change? And she's like, oh, it's going to happen. She would always say that. Oh, it's happening. I'm a 23-year overnight success. Like,
Well, you talked about delayed gratification. So that is so important to all of our viewers watching this, is knowing how to delay that gratification. But you delayed your gratification for 23 years.
yeah.
So,
And I found it extremely gratifying.
the process.
The process.
Yes. You got to enjoy the
You
process.
got to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You've written 39 books. Your latest book, My Father's Cry Night, is a great book. I want you to read the section about a grown man versus a growing man in the book. That's a beautiful, beautiful section, Kwame, and I'd love you to read that for our viewers.
And before I read that,
Mm-hmm.
if you wouldn't mind, I want to circle back to what we were talking about with Nikki Giovanni. Because part of this growing process and what I've tried to do in this book is impart a little bit of wisdom to my two daughters
I want to talk about your two daughters.
so that they can grow, so that they can not make some of the same mistakes, or they maybe have a leg up.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole experience with Nikki Giovanni, and as you talked about with, having these people around you or people in your lives who you may not recognize or realize are there to lift you up. I tell Samaya and Nandi, take from this story about Nikki Giovanni what you will, my dears. The lesson I took is that there are going to be people in your lives who did not change your diapers, who did not plan your birthday parties, who did not spank you, who did not force you to read books, who did not worry every time you had a sleepover or went to a school dance, who will show you something significant and meaningful that will matter in your life, even when you think it doesn't. There will be people who will honestly love you like I do, like your mother does, like your mothers do. So when you find your Miss Nikki Giovanni, don't do like I did. Open your arms immediately and welcome her. And don't write a play about her. That's a whole nother story.
That's great, but it reminds me just of the fact that the doors of your future are as unassuming as they are unexpected. The mentors that you come into your life, like, you don't know how they will impact your life many times until like long after they're gone. And I think it's really important for anyone watching this is to realize to honor those mentors, even when maybe you don't see them all the time, when they're harsh on you, like maybe how Nikki was when the seas. I mean, is sometimes they have their own way of showing you how they love you, and that they change your life. And hopefully your daughters will have similar Nikki Giovanni's in their life.
Yeah, I mean, we all do.
We do. We do. We have to seek it. We have to seek it, and it's a bit of luck. It's a bit of timing, but I do think mentors are so important. And you had an Instagram post about having multiple mothers, and if you're lucky, you will have multiple mothers.
Yeah.
And I think whether it's you'll have multiple fathers,
Right.
talking,
Right.
similar to, I have my father abandoned me when I was 10, so I had to seek out my own fathers over the years. And I just think that's really beautiful what you said about how you can have multiple mothers, multiple fathers, people who impact your life in a great way.
When I was writing the book, I was dealing with a lot of the 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 grief
Of your mother passing, right?
My mother
And your
passing,
your marriage breaking down.
the marriage breaking down. I was dealing with a lot of anger, some frustration. There was a lot of emotions going on, and I was pouring out. And I remember I asked a friend to read it, and she was a relatively new friend. I had just met her in maybe 3 months prior, and she was a writer, and we had grown close. And I asked her to read it. And when I ask people to read my books, friends and stuff, I'm looking for affirmation. You know, I'm not really looking for a whole lot of
A
criticism.
criticism, right?
You know,
Did she give you a lot of criticism?
she didn't give me a lot, but she said how much she really loved the book. And then she added, she didn't say but you heard it. And she said, you're still, essentially, she said, you're still not being as forthcoming as you need to be. And I'm like, first of all, how do you know? You've only known me for 3 months. And she just began to sort of check me in a way that I haven't really allowed friends to do in a long time. And I definitely haven't done it with my friends. And she called me out.
And do you think that made you then say, okay, I need to be more vulnerable, be more open in writing this book?
Initially, it upset me.
Really?
Oh yeah, and I pushed back. And I just and I pushed back, and as I began to think about it, I realized that she was right. And
You weren't being.
I was not being as open. I was still sort of hiding behind the metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
And then she said to me those prophetic words that you wanted me to read about. Um,
It starts with, did not start out as a memoir.
which
I have it right here.
huh.
You can read it from there. I just love that line.
Why Fathers Cry at Night did not start as a memoir. I did not sit down and think, well, now it's time to write a book about me and the woes of my love life. The book began as a collection of love poems inspired by the two greatest loves of my life, my daughters. But as I went deeper into the love, I went deeper into myself. And I realized that love has been the thread throughout my life. Love is love I've given, love I've received, love I've craved but couldn't grasp, love I asked for or expected but was denied, love I denied others, love I denied myself. Yeah, so the thing her name's Christine.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that she said to me was, and this was sort of after she had like checked me. Like I was like, that's real audacious. You want to stay my friend? We just been friends for 3 months. Why are you checking me?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that she said that sort of made me reevaluate and say, okay, let me consider this. And she said, Kwame, you're not a grown man. You're a growing man. And that's okay. But you got to do the work. And the work starts with you just being completely honest and open and forthcoming. And I heard it. I heard it. One thing about me is I don't just like hear something that resonates and then not move on it. Like if I hear it and it makes sense, I'm going to move on it. I may not do it right then. I may push back, but I heard it.
You heard it. And that's what made this book much more personal, very vulnerable. I mean, what do you think you're offering to your readers from from the 38 other books you've written, which are more fiction,
Right.
children's stories, not about your personal loss, and
Right.
you get into loss of your relationships.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think you offer to your readers by getting so vulnerable?
You know, I can answer that question intellectually because, I mean, I think we'd probably have to ask the readers what do they get from it. My hope, what I think, is that through this memoir, through any memoir, there's this shared experience. There's this shared connection that we are a community. And in our village, we are here to help each other grow. Whether or not that happens, how it happens, I don't know. But that's my hope, you know?
It shared the human experience. We all have those elements. You
Right,
you talk about how the book is really written for your daughters.
right.
Tell me tell me about your daughters and your relationship with your daughters.
Yeah, I mean, my I have a 14-year-old and I have a 31-year-old. Samaya and Nandi.
And the 14-year-old loves musicals.
14-year-old is an actress who loves musicals.
Mhm.
We've seen every musical.
Really, that's great. So see, she's an artist too.
She is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Um the 31-year-old is an artist in her own way, but she's more of a scientist. You know, she's more of a technical artist.
And those are very important. Engineer
Um,
artists are some of the most fascinating people I've met.
they are both very similar in their personalities. They are feisty, they are fierce, which makes sense. They're sort of, they like to be in control, but they're also, kind and compassionate and loving. Um, and they've taught me a great deal about how to be a father, which I'm still learning. Um, one of the biggest things they've taught me is how to listen more to them, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You talk about too how, how you were loved by your own father and
Hmm.
friends. It's like affected how you love your family and
Sure.
and that's something that, we all need to learn how to change maybe how the way we love, maybe how we love is not how they want to receive love. So,
It's so true. No, and I think that's where the listening comes in, paying attention. And that's definitely been my struggle, and one of the areas that I've been working on is how do I show them I love them in a way that they receive it,
mhm.
that they get it, that they need it. Like I can do that. That's not a hard ask, you know? It's not a hard ask, I don't think. For me it isn't. And so if I can do that, I'm going to do it.
You talk about in the book how one of the hardest things for you was dealing with the fact that your oldest daughter stopped talking to you for some time.
Right.
Did that get resolved?
So I remember the moment. Like she she came to live with me at age 15. I remember just feeling like, yes, this is it. I get to experience this kid's last 3 years of high school and mold and shape her. That was really exciting for me. And it was a great 3 years. Um, and there were those sort of 11 years where I saw her every other weekend. Like, I don't know if you can make up for that time lost, but we had great times. But those last 3 years before college were great. Um, and then she became a woman, and she was just out in the world doing her thing, and always just extremely independent. Didn't ask for a lot. Just really proud of the woman she was becoming, you know, and sort of looked at that independence and that fierceness, and just remember thinking, "Oh, she's good. She's got it. She's strong." And so, you know, 3 or 4 years ago when we got into this this heated argument, and we had never like had that level of argument as adults. Certainly I fussed and punished her as a kid, but when we got into this place, I engaged with her as this fierce, independent adult. And for a moment, for too long of a moment, forgot that she's just a kid, that she's just my child. I forgot that because I was talking to this fierce, independent woman. And so I treated her in that way. And she wasn't that woman, in that she was that kid. And so the kid in her just felt betrayed. You know?
Mm-hmm.
I get that. I understand that now. And it's a hard thing. As much as I talk about my father, you know, he never had to go through this.
It's so much of it is like how you're loved from
Right.
impacts how you love others.
Mm.
I remember hearing about how you how you were you're not invited to your daughter's track meets now,
Really?
or
Really? You just bringing it all up, aren't you?
no, well, you've had this in another interview because of that, and it's
Right.
because of the fact that like you were so harsh and like, but even though you were harsh on your daughter, but she did really, really
She did
well,
really well.
but you pushed her, but then she didn't want you to come to the track meets too. But
Yeah.
it's sometimes that pushing is just, it pushes them too far to the edge, and I
Right.
think it's so hard as a parent. I mean, this is why it's so hard to be a parent. I have so much respect for parents
Yeah.
because it's not easy, but how far do you want to push your children to get them to succeed in the world? Because you also like on one side you want to treat them like an adult, because if you don't treat them like an adult, everybody else is going to treat them like an adult. They're but you don't want to coddle them too. So it is a real balance.
It's a real balance. It's a struggle. After the book came out, my oldest daughter emailed me, and she said that she was ready to talk.
Hmm. That's beautiful.
So
After 3 years,
after 3 years,
what did the email say?
it was real short. Um, it was, "Hey Dad," or it was, "Hey Dad." Like the fact that she used Dad, that was all I
Mm-hmm.
needed.
Yeah.
Like it didn't matter what anything else she said. I would I think I'm ready to talk. Send me a few dates that you're available. That was it. So
Well, I hope that it leads to more talks with her. And again, it's this beautiful thing of just a father-daughter relationship. I mean, it's no parent has the manual on how to be a perfect dad.
right.
And how do you just try to do your best? And if you try your best, that goes a long way, because there's a lot of people who don't even try. So I think that's what the book really can help people who want to try, even as flawed as they are.
Right.
They might not know how quite to love. Is trying is that most. That's a huge start.
Yeah, it is.
How would you describe your writing style? I love how in the book you have like literally a mashup of a 7-Up pound cake that you baked when you were 12.
Mm-hmm.
You have poetry. You have just long form thoughts. It's a really unique style of writing. How would you describe that writing style?
Well, first of all, how great it would have been had I baked a 7-Up pound cake at 12. But I was way older than 12.
Oh, it was.
But I first ate it when I was 12.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this book is definitely a hybrid, in that poetry is sort of my first love, and it's how I communicate. It's the language I love. And that's how this book started off, as just a collection of poems. But as I began to write it and I began to see the story that it was being told, I I can't even say I thought. I have to give credit to my editor, Judy Klein. My editor said, you should really write some prose pieces. And so I did, to give context to the story that was developing in the poems, to give more background so that it wasn't so esoteric or
It's
metaphor or figurative.
it's a nice combination because
Right.
sometimes when I'm just reading poetry, I can only take poetry for so much. And then you get into prose, but then you get into one of my favorites, like cooking,
Cooking.
recipes.
Yes.
So you have some great
Yeah.
recipes too. So that's a nice, it feels just very familial, because
Yeah.
a family isn't about just one thing, it's many
There you
things.
go. That's it.
Do you want to give our viewers a poem that you think that you especially like?
Sure. Sure. I'll read a poem about um my my favorite uncle growing up.
Okay.
Because part of writing this book was trying to remember all the different places and spaces where I learned about love
Mm-hmm.
and what I carry with me to this day. And my father's family, they were very like religious, and um, it was Sunday dinners, beautiful familial place, but it was no, they were Christians. My mother's family, they were Christians, but they were Saturday night.
They were
They were
partying. They were
partying.
partiers. Oh, that's a nice
Oh
combination. You
yeah,
got the very just straight lace arrow with like the
right.
partiers.
It
That's
was dominoes and spades
oh,
and
how
chicken salad
funny.
and seafood and crabs and drinks. So this is a piece called Golden Time.
Mm-hmm.
Every now and then, when I will be in the kitchen, squeezing a lemon into milk, melting butter, or pinching salt, a song will come on. Let's say a Frankie Beverly. And my shoulders will start rising and spilling like a small wave running away, like the tender heart of a southern girl, and my palms will get all sweaty, and I'll whip my head like the eggs back and forth, the smile across my face swelling with each seducing melody, and I'll forget what's in the oven and remember how my cousins and I would lay back in the shade at family reunions and lunching on barbecue chicken and 7-Up pound cake, listening to the laid back groove, spellbound, watching how Uncle Richard and his boyfriends would bend sprightly toward the dance floor, burn it all the way up, then thrust themselves into each other like two souls on fire with such unadulterated joy that everyone was always happy and full on love. And I just remember how, you know, we loved our Uncle Richard. He was the gayest man on earth, so flamboyant. And this was during a time in the Black community where um, you don't talk about sexuality, you know, and and many folks would shun it. Not my family.
Mm.
Like we love everybody. And I remember that. And I remember him, how comfortable he felt, and how and how no and how it wasn't a big deal, and how beautiful that was.
Do you think you'd try to pass that on now to young kids today who may not grow up in that family where they being expressive, it's okay to express themselves? Do you try to, because it seems like you actually you were raised in a family that was very comfortable about being who you are, being
Right,
strong, being
right,
confident.
right.
But even today, with all of the progress that's been made in many
Hmm.
ways, is that there's a lot of kids who are not taught to be strong.
Sure,
So how do
sure.
you is that part of why you think you go to these schools and try to share that to give a little part of what Uncle Richard's
certainly that, and and more relevantly is the writing. Like, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I try to write books that are going to help kids find their voice,
Mm-hmm.
lift their voice. You know, if they can connect and relate to a character that I write about, um, who is dealing with that same sort of, how do I find my voice? How can I be assured? How can I be confident and ready? You know, if they can see that transformation, then I feel like that will help them imagine sort of their place in the world.
Mm.
Absolutely. And I feel like so many children's book authors, you know, that's this work that we do is more than entertainment. Like, we have a responsibility to inform, inspire, and ultimately, you know, at least for me, is just to try to empower.
So hopefully you can be a Nikki Giovanni to some of these young people in your life.
Well, thank you. I'll accept
changing
that.
changing the world one word at a
I'll
time.
accept that.
I want to end with some Q&As we ask all of our guests.
Okay.
This whole show is about balancing health, wealth, and
Oh, I
happiness.
feel like we're about to get deep. Let me uncross my legs
Okay,
and
uncross your
sit up.
leg. Okay. What would you say are your top 3 healthiest habits?
Well, I literally just left the spa.
Great. You
I
get a massage?
I go to the spa once a week,
That's
and it's
great.
some combination of massage, scrub, facial, um, reflexology. So
Mhm.
spa is important.
Mm.
Um, I just, you know, I lived in London for 3 years. I moved back last year.
Where do you live now?
I live in Virginia.
Okay.
And while I was in London during the lockdown, during the pandemic. And one of the things I discovered was my love of walking.
Mm.
I love walking
Outside and yeah,
outside in parks,
yeah.
thinking, listening to audiobooks. And probably the third thing is, I don't know what the third thing is.
Okay, well, you can get back to me on that. One of my principles is that part of balance is having healthy vices. And I consider healthy vices things that are not necessarily that good for you, but that
Mm-hmm.
bring you great joy.
Mm.
What would you say are your top 3
You're on this
healthy
top three
vices?
thing, huh?
I
That's
like
your
the 3.
thing.
I like threes. I like things in threes.
Does red velvet cheesecake count?
Oh, that's totally a vice. Food is such a vice. And speaking of food, I saw like you're cooking, all of like you.
Oh
It
yeah,
looks like you actually do a lot of like cooking, and you use food as a way of just connecting emotionally to your mother and her recipes
right.
and all of that.
Yeah. No,
But I
anything.
don't consider that a vice, though. I
Red
mean,
velvet's not a vice.
I think cooking is
Oh,
not a
okay,
vice, but
right. Agreed.
cheesecake definitely.
Okay, great. So red velvet would be
Okay,
one.
okay.
Um, so it's all going to be about food.
Oh,
Like, it's just, you know, I'm a huge fan of, I was a vegetarian, then I was a pescatarian, and I did not eat beef. I've never eaten pork. I did not eat beef. I was at Nikki Giovanni's house for dinner one day, and she made lamb chops. And she said, Kwame, you got to taste them. I was like, all right. There's a place in Fort Lauderdale. I forget the name of it. It's a Greek restaurant. I will go to Fort Lauderdale just to have the lamb chops at this restaurant.
really?
I am addicted to lamb chops.
Oh, you don't eat meat, but you are addicted to lamb chops.
Well, I eat meat now.
Now you eat meat. Okay.
But it started with the
Nikki
lamb.
changed you.
She changed me.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and then I guess the other healthy vice. Um, wow. I feel like you're gonna ask me for three, and I'm always gonna give you two. I
Okay.
don't
Well,
know what the third one is.
you might only have 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, food has always been like I work out a lot so
Right.
that I could then eat what I want, but it's
Yeah.
hard, especially as we get older.
Yeah.
Bread is my
Oh, the
weakness.
bread. Thank you. You're right. That's it. That's the
Oh,
healthy vice.
oh,
And it's
really?
in the book.
Oh, yeah, you don't eat bread, I read.
But there are these yeast dinner rolls that my grandmother used to make for me.
Really?
And have you ever had yeast dinner rolls?
No, I have not.
So these are, you've never had them?
I mean, I've had dinner
You've had
rolls.
dinner rolls.
Okay, I have dinner rolls.
You ever had Parker House rolls?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
It's like
essentially
that.
that. It's like
Okay.
that.
How do you make it? What's
So well, how do you make it?
Yeah, let's
I can
give
tell
our
you.
readers the recipe for your yeast dinner rolls.
I can tell you. So my friends, my grandmother every Sunday used to cook for 40 people.
Wow, that's impressive.
And she was the
40
head of
people.
the usher board. I don't know how she did all these things. However, she made the best dinner rolls.
Mm.
And all of my cousins, like 28 of my cousins, they would be fighting over these rolls. Everybody got one. You were lucky if you
you're
got
only
two.
4.
Right?
Oh yeah, that's definitely my weakness.
But she always made one pan of rolls for me
Aw.
because I was the oldest son of her only living son. And so she made a pan of rolls for me, and her my cousins hated me because I got these pan of rolls. And so let's find this recipe. Oh my gosh. Here we go. Oh, I reverse engineered my memory of my granny's rolls, and this is the closest I've ever come because she never wrote down the recipe. What I'm listening to while I'm cooking this is Brighter Day by Kirk Franklin. Active dry yeast, quarter cup of warm water, 2 large eggs, sugar, unsalted butter, salt, cup of warm milk, 4 cups of all-purpose flour. And the key to this is, once you sort of get everything together, is to let it rise.
You let it proof.
You have it in your bowl and you let it rise for 4 or 5 hours.
Oh wow, that long.
That long. It's a long thing.
That's what makes it so
then
good.
once you put them in the pans, once you sort of shape them and mold them, then you let them rise for another hour and a half.
Oh really?
So they've been rising for 6 hours or so. And so when
Sounds
they're in the
amazing.
oven, it's 5-6 minutes in the oven. They're done.
Sounds amazing, Kwame.
That is the
See, that would be
best.
total my weakness. I mean, I will fast all day so I can have like something like that at night with
Yeah.
dinner. So I would want a couple of those rolls.
Right.
What are small things you do every day to try to achieve balance in your life?
I'll say a prayer.
Prayer.
Yeah.
And do you do the prayer as like a meditation? Do you like get up every day? Do you have a certain like routine for doing your prayer?
It could be I'm praying for someone, or I'm praying, I'm meditating about something, or, I work out most mornings. And when I'm on the road, since I'm on the road a lot, I'm in the hotel gyms.
So you're working out at gyms at the hotel. Okay. So what does your workout look like?
It's a treadmill.
Okay.
It is
treadmill. Do you do weights?
It's bench press.
Okay.
It's curls. It's ab work.
How often is your workout schedule?
When I'm on it, it's 5-6 days a week.
But when you're
most times it's 3.
But you're traveling so much now.
Right.
I mean, would you say? I mean, especially. I mean, it looks like between all your tours, school visits.
Right.
I mean, you do a lot of traveling. How do you balance like the traveling, staying at hotels, and working out? It's really hard to do that.
It's not. It's early. It's early morning because I'm up pretty early.
Okay.
But
so you make that the first thing you do.
First thing I do. And if I don't do it in the morning, it's hard to do it later. But the biggest thing I do for self-care and just taking care of myself, I am a huge fan of naps.
Oh, yes.
Oh my goodness. I do, you can do a 22-minute nap and you're golden. I don't do 22-minute naps though. I do like naps.
I do like naps too.
Oh, yeah. I don't play. Every day.
That's so good. That's so healthy for you.
So I've been doing that for a while.
You also mentioned walking, and I think part of what it makes walking so powerful is the vitamin D you get from being outside. Like we forget that like our bodies can't produce our own vitamin D. So when you get your vitamin D from the sun, it literally changes the chemicals in your body when you're getting that daily vitamin D.
Yeah.
And I bet walking in London when it's cloudy a lot, it's like you don't get a lot of vitamin D. So
yeah, that's a good point. Because London is just a gloomy place. But I definitely enjoyed the walking around Regent and Hyde Park a lot.
Do you still do the walking?
That's why I do the treadmill, because it's kind of hard to walk here
Yeah.
unless you go to walking trails.
Yeah.
Like my neighborhood back home is it's not a walking neighborhood.
Hmm.
So I miss that about London a lot.
What would you say are the top 3 books you recommend the most?
You mean besides mine?
Mm-hmm.
Wi-Fi's crack night.
Okay.
The top 3 books that I love. You're asking to recommend for others to read.
Right. To our readers, to our viewers, our listeners, what are the top 3 books that you would say has impacted you the most in your life?
Oh, okay. I'd probably say um, any novel by J. California Cooper,
Okay.
and primarily because my mom loved those books,
Mm-hmm.
so I love them because they remind me of her. The poetry of Pablo Neruda,
He's an amazing poet.
love poems. Oh, and I'm just gonna pick some random book that just is amazing. There's this amazing poetry book, speaking of parenting and fatherhood, by this poet named Clint Smith. It's called Above Ground. And it's beautiful poetry, and it's accessible.
Mm,
So it's not like, you're gonna be feeling like, oh, this is staid and incomprehensible. Like you'll get it.
really.
And it's just beautiful. It's about a father and his relationship with his children and his wife. And it's just gorgeous.
Mm. Thank you for sharing those,
You're
Kwame.
welcome.
My last question is if you could share a single message on a billboard about how to balance the combination of health, wealth, and happiness, how people can achieve that, the combination of health, wealth, and happiness, what would that message be on that billboard?
Health.
Wealth and happiness.
Dribble, fake, shoot, miss. Dribble, fake, shoot, miss.
Mm.
Dribble, fake, shoot, miss. Dribble, fake, shoot, swish.
Love that. Oh my God, I love that. Love the basketball reference. Thank you for being here, Kwame. Where can our viewers find you?
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
You've been great.
Yeah.
Thank you for getting vulnerable, and thank you for just sharing to our viewers and through this book what it means to be a father and what it means to love. And I think it's a great book. Get this book, everyone. Thank you, Kwame. But where can they find you on social media?
KwameAlexander.com and at Kwame Alexander. I'm on Instagram and all the socials.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for watching. I love you. I love you all. And until next time. Mwah.